Well, we're about to have a discussion of Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown, which is, of course, adapted from Elmore Leonard's Rum Punch. I am Elvis Mitchell, and start with my left.
I'm Scott Fondas.
Stephanie Zaharik.
Tim Lucas.
And Andy Klein.
Scott, what was your take on that?
I love this movie. I think it's a very different film from Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction in tone, even though it's very much set in the Quentin Tarantino universe. I think it almost feels like a movie that a director would make late in his career because it has an autumnal quality to it. It's a film about people who are kind of past their prime, broken down. They've kind of given up a little bit, and the two main characters of the story, Jackie Brown, who's this flight attendant for a really two-bit airline, and who's caught up in this smuggling operation by her boss Ordell, and then this bail bondsman Max Cherry, who's also kind of a guy who seems to have had a lot of missed opportunities in life. Their romance together, which sort of kind of never quite goes all the way, is really touching and beautiful and wise and mature in a way that I think caught a lot of people off guard after the kind of amped up, testosterone intensive pyrotechnics of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction.
Stephanie?
Well, I hadn't been so crazy about either Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction. And I saw Jackie Brown, and it was love at first sight. I loved this movie immediately from the first frame. I have loved it I've probably watched it 7 or 8 times.
What do you
by
love so
this
much
point.
about it? What
Well,
hit you?
The first time I saw it, Pam Grier in that opening, the opening credit sequence, is so beautiful. And you're watching her, and I was just completely seduced by her. And then you have to wait a half an hour into the movie before she comes back again, this beautiful, incredible creature. So part of it was just, seeing this face that was so familiar to me, but she was also somebody who kind of hadn't been around for a while. And also Robert Forster, who was one of my childhood crushes from his days as
So you're not just wearing
Banyan.
blush right now, you are blushing.
No, I love Robert Forster. So the two of them together, I could not even have imagined a better pairing. So I was mad about it from the beginning. And I think, as Scott said, it is autumnal. And just the idea of seeing these two actors who had, been off the scene for a while, and here they have this wonderful story, this wonderful script, and they rose to the occasion. I think it's pretty close to perfect.
Tim?
Yeah, I agree. To me, what's most important about the movie is that it condemns tendencies in Hollywood to ignore actors who are past a certain age. And this film shows how much actors like Pam Grier and Robert Forster still have to offer when they have something approaching a spent life etched into their face, and when they have a greater range of emotions to draw on. The movie, it just gets into nuances of relationships that you don't often see in films portrayed so poignantly, and of everything that you're expecting from a Quentin Tarantino movie, poignancy isn't really on the list yet, so he surprises you.
You got any cigarettes in here?
You won't find any cigarettes in there.
Can we stop and get cigarettes?
Sure. You ever been to the river bottom?
I don't think so.
It's all right. It's a cop bar.
Can we just stop at a 7-Eleven or something?
Thought you might like to have a drink.
I'd love to have a drink, but not there.
How about the Hilton by the airport?
Is it dark?
Kind of a sports bar.
It doesn't sound dark.
Why does it have to be dark?
Because it looks like I just got out of jail, that's why.
I'm glad that I did not have an opportunity to write about it when it came out, because I'm one of those people, and there were several or many, who, because of the expectation from Pulp Fiction, which was kind of an impossible act to follow in a lot of ways, I went in with a different expectation of Jackie Brown and felt kind of let down the first time I saw it. It wasn't till about, I don't know, 3 months later or something, I went back and caught it again, and knowing what I was going to be going into, I thought it was terrific. It was just, even though he's got little bits of fast-talking dialogue, I mean, Samuel Jackson never shuts up. But then you've got Robert Forster and De Niro, both of whom I think their total dialogue would take up about 3 pages. And I think everybody was terrific in this, even in his short role, Chris Tucker.
Man, you must be out of your fucking mind if you think I'm gonna get in this dirty-ass trunk.
And yes, Bridget Fonda, who I didn't recognize, actually, for some reason. And I was just thinking, my, how lovely. That's a version of what I was thinking.
When I first saw the film, all I could remember about it at first were her legs, which are sort of photographed like a monument whenever she's on the screen. So he's not afraid to fetishize certain things, but it's really a movie about relationships and emotions.
So when'd you get out of jail?
4 days ago.
Where at?
Susanville.
How long?
About 2 months shy of 4 years.
4 years? For what?
Bank robbery.
Really?
Hi. Later.
Shit, I'm impressed.
The other thing that's important about the movie to me is that it shows how indebted he is to Elmore Leonard in terms of constructing his voice as a filmmaker and also his sense of structure.
Well, the other thing too is that as much as I love Tarantino's dialogue, often it's very talky and he goes in these, great, wonderful tangents. But the thing is, Elmore Leonard's prose is so focused. I mean, every sentence is like a well-packed suitcase. And so I think when you have that combination of Tarantino riffing on that and kind of reinterpreting it for the screen, it's just kind of a magical combination.
Here we go. AK-47, the very best there is. When you absolutely, positively got to kill every motherfucker in the room, except no substitutes.
Nothing gets between me and my AK.
The opening shot reminds me of the closing shot of Queen Christina in some ways. It's like you open with the enigmatic shot of the heroine, You know that she's the heroine because we're focused on her. And then, as you say, she disappears for a long time. But you get a chance to study her and move past the surface, of this Pam Grier image. And I think there's a point to that. You're supposed to be looking deeper at the people in this movie.
I mean, he's filming Pam Grier on a people mover in a terminal at LAX that so many people pass through every day without thinking twice about its cinematic possibilities,
And it's like an Egyptian mosaic,
this great,
built for
like,
a god
1970s tile wall.
1960s.
Or
tile
1960s tile wall.
It's
that
a
I think
classic.
that you see in Airplane, if I'm not mistaken, another movie shot extensively at LAX.
I guess I also just ended up thinking too, just as a black person, to see that kind of glamour shot being offered to a black actress in a movie of this size hasn't happened since even. I mean, it's been almost 20 years now, and when is the last time you saw any major filmmaker or any studio take a black actress who was that iconic for her sheer physicality in the beginning of her career and just have her be stately and in repose almost? Because those of us who knew Pam Grier from the early days just knew her as somebody who entered and was always talking and always moving. I just have a sense of Pam Grier's elbows all the time and just being offered up like basically the prow of a ship. And to be treated in that way was an awe-inspiring moment. I mean, I can't tell you what that moment meant for my sisters who still talk about that movie in that way, just because to see that woman, that person being given that kind of respect, and also to spin what had been a very different physical type from Leonard's Rum Punch, and to do that with it just really A, sort of claimed that this was Quentin's own version of that, but B, still reminded us how much it influenced him, Elmore Leonard, and those exchanges from Leonard that are often both kind of shocking and funny and violent all at the same time, how much he owed to Leonard.
And also announcing that this is a movie that, you know, is going to reference the blaxploitation cinema of the 70s, but is not that. You know, it's got Across 110th Street on the soundtrack.
At the beginning and the end.
While we're in LAX.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, you know, it's LA, it's today, it's not then. You know, it's Pam Grier 20 years after her stardom. You know, it lays a lot out in that opening shot. And then it's almost also like a reverse of Psycho, where you open, you know, with Marion Crane and then she disappears. Here you have, you know, you know, someone who disappears and comes back, you know, who's not in the movie for the first 20 to 30 minutes and then is in the rest of the movie. It's an interesting little tease.
The movie also lifts these actors who are like genre film actors and puts them in a mainstream motion picture where everything is ratcheted up, and it gives them an opportunity to show what they can do at their best to a large audience of people.
And it's interesting because for me, it brings to mind again Reservoir Dogs and that sort of relish that those actors had in that material. The kind of, not the same as relish, but the kind of appetite that you see in very subtle ways in this movie. I mean, people getting that last shot at the apple, and it's that sort of thing of not just casting actors who, as a kind of a novelty act, just to remind people that they're around, but really divining their strengths in ways that hadn't been done for them before.
According to this isn't the first time that you've run afoul of the law. In 1985, while a stewardess for Delta, you were busted while carrying drugs for a pilot?
The pilot was my husband and I got off.
You mean they offered you a deal and you grabbed it? He did time, you did probation. I didn't hear you ask permission to smoke in my office.
May I smoke?
No, you may not. So you get off with a slap on the wrist, but all this criminal activity fucks up your shit for good with the big airlines. Cut to 13 years later, you're 44 years of age, you're flying for the shittiest little shuttle fucking piece of shit Mexican airline that there is. Well, you make what, $13,000 a year?
I make $16,000 plus benefits.
You've been in the service industry 19 years and all you make is $16,000 plus benefits? Didn't exactly set the world on fire, did you, Jackie?
I think it's true of Quentin cinema in general, that there's a kind of a uniquely, I don't want to use the word colorblind because I don't think it's that. I think he's very aware of race, but he addresses race in a way that's completely different from other filmmakers. I mean, these are not movies about race, but race is very present in them. And in a way, I think, you know, you feel this kind of, there's this level playing field, you know, in Quentin's movies where the character of Jackie Brown, who's a white woman in Elmore Leonard's novel, a blonde, can become a black woman, and it doesn't affect the story. You know, this doesn't have to be a role that was created for a black person to play. You know, but at the same time, you know, his films are full of, you know, a familiarity with how people of different races interact with each other, and it's there without being the subject of the film.
But in some ways, though, it is a subject because just think about the way Sam Jackson talks to her when they're at the bar, and then just the way he basically is sort of containing the attitude of the audience towards Pam Grier, how in the 20 years since she'd done those features at AIP, that she's still not only a shatteringly beautiful woman, but still has this enormous presence in the room, and she really takes up the room.
She does, and I think there's actually something defiant, maybe unintentionally defiant, in the way in the way he allows her to be who she is and just to present her as like, yes, you should be looking at this woman, you should be paying attention. And I think in all of Quentin Tarantino's movies, and particularly Jackie Brown, it's just like, no, it's like, I'm gonna cast who I want, and this is all part of my universe, and it needs to be part of yours too.
And it's that great way that he opens up black culture to the mainstream, where when he when she's playing her music and Max goes, well, what is that song anyway? And he goes shopping for it, and it just sort of resonates throughout the entire
the cassette
film.
rack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is on the way out even when that movie was made.
I know.
But again, I think for Quentin, that's just, that's like the music that he likes or that he grew up with, and, all of these things, Pam Grier movies. I don't, I think for him, it's all part of it's all mixed into the pot. I don't think, he doesn't put up barriers between any of these things. It's all, like I said, on a kind of, on a level playing field. He doesn't say this isn't black music, it's just good music.
She may be the rare person who gets two entrances in a Tarantino movie. That one at the beginning, then when she's coming out of Sybil Brand and Natural High is played, and it's almost like you can feel a summer breeze come through when she gets that second entrance, and basically Max is just kind of awestruck by her coming down that and giving her another long. This time it's a walk rather than the moving sidewalk, so that having that mirror is just kind of.
And when she makes her second entrance, the camera isn't so much on her as it is on Robert Forster and on his face and how he's responding to her. And so, Tarantino has already shown us like how beautiful she is. We've already, had a chance to sort of bask in that. And I think that his focusing on Forster's face and the change that sort of comes across his face is a way of saying, not of drawing attention away from Pam Grier, but of saying, pay attention. Because the look on this guy's face says it all.
I just keep thinking about that kiss at the end.
Yeah, well.
Which is that moment that, again, that sort of thwarting of conventional romance. But it's something. It's more like these moments that build memories, and it takes me back again to not Hawks but Cirque. I feel that kind of thing, where it's just this rising of emotion, these emotions that will never quite be unfold, and a love story will never quite be requited in any conventional way, and people have to live with what they got from it. I mean, that felt like the most Cirque moment to me of anything he'd done.
I think it's partly indicative of something that I noticed about the POV in Quentin's films, which is, with the exception of Kill Bill, it's very hard to say who the central character is or who the protagonist is. 90% of films, particularly if you exclude Altman, then 90% of films really have a central POV. And none of these do. And I haven't clocked how long Robert Forster is on screen versus Pam Grier, but I sort of think he's really the protagonist in this, isn't he?
Well, but she's still the center of the movie. She always is. Even unlike the other films, when we shift to the other characters' stories and they're talking about other things, when she's not on screen, she's still the object of the film.
The object, but I think the character whose emotions we are exposed to is Max Cherry.
Because he's more
else.
emotionally open than anybody else in the movie. He's pretty plain spoken. Everybody else has a scheme and is trying to keep something from everybody else. He is the one person who states exactly what he's thinking and feeling.
All of these things are true, but Tarantino has said that he wanted this to be his Howard Hawks movie, and I think in that sense, it really is an ensemble. I mean, it's hard to decide, like, well, who are we really supposed to sympathize with, or who, because it's all part of just hanging out with these characters, and that kind of casualness of getting to know them, of getting to know what their individual stories are, is just part of the way it works. So. No, I don't really know that there is one kind of central figure.
No, but she's always being talked about. It's all about her. So, and it's kind of interesting because it's the only film really with a character's name in the title up until this point. But he's not really the central figure in the movie. It's about killing him. Rather, the title is about the character, and it's also kind of Quentin's penchant for sort of turning the kind of thing on his head, where there's a title character who's not in the film very much, and we don't really know what she's thinking or feeling a lot of the time, which is something that also comes from Elmore Leonard a lot too, when people talk and we never know exactly what it is that's at stake for them at any given point. I mean, because I would say the film is as much about Sam Jackson is about Forster.
I know, but I think the reason that the movie's title is Jackie Brown is because of Pam Grier's legacy as an actress, because her movies were Coffee, Foxy Brown. It was always her name.
What?
Jackie Brown.
I think he also changed the name of the character. That
Yeah.
she's Jackie something else in the novel.
Well, that name comes from the gunrunner in The Friends of Eddie Coyle. And he basically said, having read that book, that transformed the way he wrote crime fiction. That was it was because there's really basically these characters talking about doing a job rather than doing a job, which happens so much in not only in Leonard's world, but in Quentin's world as well.
This shit seeming kind of risky now, fuck this.
Now let me lay it all out to you, okay?
I make 2 deliveries. The first with 10,000, like a dry run. They watch it, see how it works. Then the second delivery, I come in with a $500,000.
See, that's too much exposure. I ain't going nowhere near that money.
You don't have to. I told him you never pick up the money yourself. You always send someone, and I never know who it is.
That's a good idea.
If you listen, it's a damn good idea.
I did a profile of Pam Grier for Premiere Magazine and got to go to the set and just to be around her. And her unbridled excitement about this was like a physical force. First of all, just to be around her and to see how spectacular she looked in person. And also just to be treated this way by a director, which had never happened to her before, to have somebody sculpt material for her, to also, that's why I keep saying, for me, her presence is key in this movie, even when she's not on screen, in the way that when other Tarantino movies, when we move away from one set of characters to another, there are different concerns they're talking about. She's basically the fulcrum of the picture at all times, no matter if she's around or not. And I know we're talking about that, but we shouldn't underestimate the impact of that. And I wish it had a bigger impact in terms of opening the world up, and because there are all these shibboleths about how films with black characters don't travel, but having Pam Grier and with the imprimatur of Quentin Tarantino, I wish it had been more of an earth-shattering event than it had been. I mean, and I wish she got an Oscar nomination for it, just for that sheer regality of her presence. I wish that there had been some kind of notice taken of that in a bigger way. And I think that's one of the movies that probably is having a much subtler long-term impact than any of the other movies.
I mean, I think it's his mellowest film, which is why it may have caught a lot of people off guard.
But all that funk, all that
time,
R&B is even pretty mellow stuff from that period. That's right. You think about that. I mean, there's nothing like Jungle Boogie or the Al Green from Pulp Fiction. I mean, it's very sort of soft, almost this kind of, a lot of it's this Philly soul.
And the Brothers Johnson, they had great use of Strawberry Letter 23.
The cover, the Brothers Johnson's cover of Shuggie Otis, an LA figure, and which I thought was a really kind of great moment too, just having that in there. But it's all, I mean, even the Brothers Johnson did much more bombastic dance floor stuff, and every piece of music in the movie is sort of done to sort of keep everything really cool. It's basically almost all like 70s bar music.
I also think this movie is a real Valentine to the South Bay, where
you said Los Angeles. I really think of it as being a South Bay movie.
This one is. I mean, explicitly, and you have the little title cards that tell you, now we're in Carson, now we're in Torrance, and these are places that you almost never see in movies that are shot in Southern California. Or if you do, they're not identified. They're just sort of an incidental, part of LA that got dropped in the movie. And I remember being very struck because I mean, I was living in LA when I saw this movie, but I had never ventured to Torrance. When I saw Del Amo Fashion Center, world's largest indoor shopping mall, I thought I have to add this to the list of places to see.
I always think of the ironically named Del Amo Fashion Center.
Yeah, the Del Amo Fashion Center.
Where fashion has not quite visited that place yet. But
she did okay. She got that suit.
But and they're also
another black suit, by the way.
But they're lovingly filmed. They almost, I mean, again, in this sort of very unaffected visual style, a place like the Del Amo Fashion Center nevertheless attains a mythic kind of status in the movie. I love that.
Ow! Telling you, got the shit. Oh.
Just let
Just
go.
straighten up, bitch.
Mom,
You fucking just. Oh, look at this. It's a nice to look at.
I think I like it. I'll take it. Yeah, I'm in a hurry. Can you ring it up for me? Cash or charge? Cash.
It's a nice outfit on her. I'm gonna go over and look at this Mitch
You
and
just
just
stay right fucking here, all right? Just stay right here.
Are you sweating? Job a little too much for you?
It's hard to imagine De Niro taking a part this small for many directors, but then to take it and really run with it and really do something interesting with it. And I think that's, you know, one of the things that's interesting about all these movies is that even if it is a star vehicle like Jackie Brown, which is kind of a star vehicle, and Kill Bill, which is kind of a star vehicle, you don't have the impression that anybody's more important than anybody else. You know, it's that kind of the thing I was saying before about everybody being on the same wavelength. It's sort of like, you know, everybody is just giving selfless performances in a way. I mean, I think that's something that Quentin manages to get out of actors that a lot of directors can't. You know, there's no kind of prima donna antics going on in any of these performances. You know, it's sort of like everyone realizes they're going to shine. They don't have to work so hard.
People just sort of forget about that performance, but he's so low-key in this way that he often isn't, you know? And it's just wonderful to watch. It's really fun.
It's almost like we're watching him in the green room of his performance.
Yeah,
Because it sort of builds to a boil and then he
and then he
comes out.
turns around and he's like, I just can't take anymore.
Well,
I'm shooting her.
Right.
I
Has
don't
he ever
care.
played somebody so sort of, I don't know if impenetrable is the right word, but it's just, you know, he's there and he's expressing almost nothing except a little bit in his face and sort of in his grunting and, you know, sort of sounds he makes. But it's as though, I know there's some inner life there, but it seems like not a real complex one.
I felt in this case he didn't have the pressure of having to be the star and having the movie on his shoulders, and that seemed to relax him somewhat. I mean, he got to do something he probably, in the way he hadn't really done since the game that couldn't shoot straight, where he comes in and basically gets to be a part of the puzzle rather than the center of things. And that seemed to, in terms of that mellowness you were talking about, that seemed to sort of translate into a very different kind of performance for him, an incredibly different performance. But with the exception of Max, who is incredibly plain-spoken and is what he is, every guy in the movie thinks he's smarter than he turns out to be. I mean, even De Niro is trying to sort of be a little smarter and trying to keep a step ahead of his beach bunny, of the surfer girl he's been lent. But
And then he really misses her when she's gone. It's so poignant. It's like,
but that great scene he has in the van when he's just trying to explain, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. That may be the funniest thing he's ever done on purpose. I mean, funnier than anything he's done in any comedy. It's just great stuff, and it's that Elmore Leonard thing you brought up earlier, Tom. All those tones being sort of placed side by side, and nothing sort of registering more than the other. I mean, that's, again, you said before, that's what they call directing.
Yeah.
And I think people tend to think of Quentin more as a writer still than as a director.
Probably because he writes such great dialogue. And I think people, when they think of directing, they tend to think of it primarily in visual terms. And, you know, often people have the flashiest visual styles are not the writer-directors.
And there's not that flourish you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he has total mastery of, you know, how to put a scene together, you know, where to put the camera for maximum impact, that idea of the emotional distance of the camera from the actor. You know, I think he really gets that. But it really is in an almost classical Hollywood sensibility, like you know, what you would think of Howard Hawks or Fritz Lang or you know, George Cukor or somebody like that. It's not style for the sake of style. That's another thing that a lot of the people, I think, who who sort of came after Tarantino, who were trying to do movies in this register, missed. You know, they were all about the surface flourish and all about sort of drawing attention. I don't think these movies really draw attention to themselves in that way. It's in other ways. It's actually more under the surface. And you know, that's what Tarantino's great at, is he can find the poetry in these kind of ordinary things like LAX or the Del Amo Fashion Center, you know, or you know, or a cheap apartment hotel on Sunset Boulevard in Pulp Fiction. You know, these kind of places, they have a lyricism to them, precisely because they're not gussied up in any fancy way.
But that's one of the things too. There's a sense of sort of having a great eye for the everyday. I mean, her apartment. I mean, I just think about all these apartments that he's shot in so many places that are places that people live in, people of limited means. You get these sense of people really trying to make the best of these very small environments that they have, and how space can be, or lack of space can be, very oppressive. And she talks about what she's trying to do. And she has a real sense of herself. I mean, even if she's not giving much away, when she's talking to Max, she's sort of telling him how she's had to make do with the little bit that she has. But the fact is that even when it's Pam Grier in a tiny apartment, it's still Pam Grier in a tiny apartment.
But that apartment looks great. I mean, it doesn't look like, you know, it's not a costly, like lavishly appointed place, but you know, she's painted the walls kind of
a home.
Deep, like rich color.
Yeah, right.
Her records are like all lined up there, and it's just, you know, she's got these nice prints on the wall, and you're looking at it and you're like, yes, it's like someone lives here.
What strikes me about this movie is that, more so than the others, and that money always plays an important part in the movies, whether it's a heist or, you know, what people are going to be paid for doing a hit. But in this film, you really get a sense of the difference money would make in people's lives, because it addresses people on a lower key. You know, you see their homes. You know, you inhabit their dreams. So you get a real sense of the difference a sudden windfall could make.
And when you hear, she says several times that she makes $16,000 a year. And I don't know anyone who can watch that movie and not just start doing calculations.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How would I, you know, how would you make that work?
You know, and part of what makes that opening shot so striking is the uniform that she's wearing. You know, because the whole idea of the air hostess, you know, it used to be like they would get models and like these beautiful young women to do it. And you're seeing older women do it now. But you know, she's wearing it with nobility, but you get the sense that it's a job that's somewhat beneath her.
Yeah, and it's a polyester jacket. She's got the little scarf, but it's just like she's wearing it like it's
a costume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an outfit for her. But I mean, I just find myself thinking too about Ordell's beard.
An object of fascination.
Complete object of fascination, and
because it matches the braid back.
Oh yes, there's a lot of hundreds of man hours at some place not far from the Del Amo Fashion Center where he went to get his beard and his hair done.
He's like a rattlesnake.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, it's and then the realism. And I keep saying this often about the way people dress. I mean, that sort of awful Hawaiian shirt would be the kind of thing that Lewis would wear because it'd be kind of roomy and comfortable, and it has colors, so it's not just like a prison jumpsuit. But Ordell's really kind of sleek, slightly 70-ish bandlon shirt, so that zipper, so you can see his sleek, hairless chest. I mean, it's the way these people dress, that is by far the most realistic. But it's often, I mean, sometimes they're the black suits, but I think about that great job, not only of the costuming, but also the way the music and the editing play together. I mean, it really is, the way those scenes are so sinuously cut, it's just like that kind of really kind of floating, really cool sense of all that 70s R&B that doesn't get played as much as the bigger hits do.
Well, that was one of the things that really struck me when I saw it, was these songs that I heard over and over again on Top 40 radio growing up, and like just loved them. And I had never, no other filmmaker had ever just like put them front and center. Like, this is, you know, this stuff is wonderful. And there's so much affection there for things that are I don't want to diminish them by saying, oh, they'd been forgotten, but they sort of had.
Baby love, my baby love, I need you, oh how I need you. But all you do is treat me bad, break my heart and make me sad. Tell me, what did I do wrong to make you stay away so long?
I think this movie, you can't underestimate the effect it's had on black audiences. And the way you talked about some of his films being movies that people really are possessive of, this has that thing. I mean, because it feels like something that wasn't just something that had to be made because there was this critical mass of attention towards Pam Grier at that period. I mean, it's a movie that he chose to make that some part of me thinks he wanted to shift the emphasis of the film industry with, and that didn't happen. I mean, and it's surprising to me that it did not, because I know it did well enough in box office terms, but certainly the kind of respect it got from the critics might have, I thought, augured a new period in film. And I just wonder if that was something that he was reaching for as well, because you can sort of see the shifts in the culture that these other movies, that Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs made happen. And among the most imitated movies of the last 20 years. And that has not happened with this yet, I think, because it is what you used earlier, Tim. It's anomalous, it's sui generis. I mean, there's nothing else like it, really. Yeah. And it's a movie that you can't imitate because it's so much, I think, probably his most personal film. And the movie that really comes out of him in really interesting ways.
You know, Quentin is sort of like, I love these people and I want them to be on screen again, rather than, it's not like I'm casting Pam Grier because she's, you know, her rep from 20 years ago is going to bring people into the theater.
But I think that really has to do with the education. You know, it has to do with having that sense of cinema, you know, to know what these people are capable of. You know, so you're not just casting Pam Grier for her iconic status. It's because you saw in these movies that she did that she had the talent to do something more sophisticated. You know, that she could go to the next level, and that while Robert Forster was toiling in B movies and television, that he was bringing something to them, you know, beyond what the material demanded, you know. And I think that's you know, that Quentin has that ability, and David Lynch has that ability, not just drawing names out of a hat. You know, they're honing in on people who, you know, just for one reason or another never quite got their due, and they're giving them another chance. And sometimes they're even more interesting because it's later in their career and they do have this kind of, this weathered, you know, wearied sort of countenance to them that is certainly right for the tone of the kind of movies Quentin makes.
But it does make you realize, like, how few filmmakers really care about things like that. Like, obviously, somebody could have seen Jackie Brown, somebody with enough clout, maybe not as much clout as Tarantino has, but somebody could have seen that and said, I want to work with her, I want to do something. And it was like, where was that person?
When you think about all the people who, as you were saying before, who followed and imitated and sort of like done the shallowest kind of attempts at doing these movies, but you even see it with the way Sam Jackson is used in movies. I mean, nobody uses him as well as Quentin does. I mean, nobody understands what he can do. He's basically used for a kind of a one-dimensional bluster in movies often. And you know, he's so much richer and more varied an actor than that. And the fun he has in those scenes where he thinks he's got one over on her and he's playing her, and that look at the very end, I mean, that shocked look on his corpse is such a great tag. And that
a woman did this to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was smarter than her. How did this happen? And even when I basically, through my indolence, basically am responsible for her being in this place in the first place, how could she like game me? But it gets to the way that Quentin uses Sam Jackson. Basically, people are still using Sam in some approximation of Jules, and Quentin does not do that. And that's what. If you had somebody describe Jackie Brown to you, you might think that Ordell was Jules. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's part of the Leonard demimonde, and it works very well, too.
He has lots of layers, you know, that, you know, when he expresses grief that, you know, Bridget Fonda has been killed, he misses her. It's, you know, it's sad. I mean, it means something to him, but he doesn't overplay it, but it's there.
Where's Melanie?
Well, that's what I want to tell you. You see, she was bugging me the whole time. She got pissy with me because I wouldn't let her carry the bag, and then she started running her fucking mouth about, you know, like, because I couldn't remember where the car was parked right away when we came out. So then she got on me about that. Is it this aisle, Lewis? Is it that aisle, Lewis? It's totally fucking with my nerves, man.
So what, you left her there?
I shot her.
You shot Melanie?
Twice. In the parking lot.
You couldn't talk to her?
Well, how can you talk to her? You know,
You couldn't just hit her?
Maybe, but at that moment, I don't know.
You shot her twice? Is she dead?
I pretty much.
What do you mean pretty much, Lewis? That ain't no fucking answer. Yes or no? Is she dead?
I think so.
You think so? Tell me, Lewis.
She's dead. She's dead.
But where'd you shoot her?
In the chest and the stomach.
If you had to do it, then you had to do it, right? What we don't want is that bitch surviving on us. You know, anybody but that woman.
What do you guys feel like the lasting impact of Jackie Brown is? If there, I mean, what do you think, Andy?
Lasting impact. I'm not sure to what extent it influenced people. I mean, it holds up as a film, and it'll always be there to go back to. But compared to the impact that the two films before it had, which were visible, sometimes very bad impact. I'm not sure whether this sort of led to anything else by anybody else.
Yeah, I would agree. I think what's significant about the film as a marker in Tarantino's career is that it seems to be the point where his direction reached a level of what looks like effortless mastery. In the earlier films, you can always see him sort of making the reach for the effect and pulling things off. I mean, there are plenty of surprises, but in this film, because it's a subtler film, it comes across as more sophisticated, but not showy about it.
I think it's the quiet favorite of quiet people. A lot of people like to advertise how much, Pulp Fiction changed their lives. And, the few people that I talked to before I came here, I said, well, they want me to talk about Jackie Brown. And they would say, I love Jackie Brown. That's his greatest movie. I think it's one of the great movies of the 90s, one of the greatest movies of the 90s. And I also think you were talking about that sort of effortlessness of it, and it is so technically beautiful, but also so casual in that way that Hawks was able to pull off, that so few filmmakers can do that. And it really is, I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful example of that.
Yeah, I think it's some people's sort of quiet favorite, like Stephanie says, or it's a movie people discover belatedly. I mean, I think its reputation has definitely grown, in the 15 years since it was released, and I think that obviously it was successful at the time, but not as successful as Pulp Fiction. I think there are, some people who may discover it, and then, like a lot of movies that were discovered sort of after their initial theatrical release, like The Shawshank Redemption, they become sort of more personal in a way. People say, well, everyone's seen Pulp Fiction, but have you seen Jackie Brown?